The name's Bond. Chemical Bond. Ionic Bond? Whatever. Spy games are fun, right? There's a lot of appeal, you know? Whether you're sneaking around in the shadows or blowing everything to hell and back, it's hard to resist the allure of the secret agent, and nobody does it better than James Bond 007. After cementing itself in the first-person shooter Hall of Fame thanks to titles like GoldenEye and Nightfire, the franchise took a sharp turn into the third person in 2004 with Everything or Nothing. The game was a big risk at the time. When Bond went third person before this, it crashed and burned on the PS1, so understandably, many were hesitant about this new direction. Thankfully, for the most part, the game not only doesn't suck, but it delivers something entertaining, authentic, and most importantly, fun. Before Gears of War rewrote the playbook for the cover-based shooter, third-person games often differed wildly in their approaches to stealth and gunplay. Everything or Nothing tries to find its own way through these mechanics via your standard slate of weaponry, a simplistic cover system, and lock-on targeting. The latter two are best described as functional but noticeably unrefined. When stages get crowded, focusing on a particular enemy can be challenging, and death doesn't always feel like your fault, especially when enemies are off-screen, which is the cardinal sin of any difficulty curve. A simple but satisfying hand-to-hand combat system does alleviate these issues at close range, and context-sensitive takedowns actually make it really fun to use. Overall, gameplay is responsive and reliable enough, but when the cracks begin to show, it can be enough to sour the experience a bit, especially in later levels. Helpfully, the game doesn't lean too hard into running and gunning, as it integrates many different types of gameplay to balance out the experience, and this mixing up of the design is one of the game's greatest strengths. A rappel gun adds generous verticality to many stages, with one even taking place entirely in freefall. Driving missions are built on the Need for Speed engine of the time and feel excellent. A motorcycle level set on a very long and real bridge outside of New Orleans remains an arcadey and ridiculous highlight. Stealthy stages, turret sections, tank runs, boss fights with unique rules of engagement, there's a lot on offer here, and it keeps any one gameplay style or mechanic from getting too stale. With this variety already a strength, Everything or Nothing really shines as it layers elements atop that core gameplay. Top of the list are Bond moments, which reward you for performing actions throughout a stage that Bond would do in the same situation. Most of them do require a bit of creative thinking. Some are tactical, others are cheesy, and still others are cheeky.
Oh my, we've learned a few new tricks, haven't we? Could you be a dear and get me a drink, please?
I mean, she calls the guards if you don't. Another major feature is Bond Sense, in which you can slow down time around you and assess your current situation by zeroing in on enemies, looking at your entire inventory, and highlighting objectives or points of interest throughout a stage. As a way to simulate Bond really thinking, and as sort of a panic button to let you plan out your next move more methodically, it's a great mechanic. A variety of upgradable gadgets also reinforce that secret agent on a mission feeling, though some are less useful than others. The MVPs here are probably the nanosuit, which makes you invisible briefly, and the Q-Spider, which lets you access tight corridors, stun enemies, blow things up, and more. A scoring and ranking system hands out medals based on overall mission performance that you can use to unlock concept art, more equipment upgrades, and even a bevy of cheats. It was a simpler time. The replayability of the single-player mode is genuinely impressive, even if you don't fully vibe with the game's story. Oh man, the story.
007. Diavolo's invaded Red Square with an army of platinum tanks and is advancing on the Kremlin.
A truly absurd plot involving nanobots, tanks everywhere, and geopolitical brinksmanship takes things into sci-fi territory at times, and it goes beyond even the most outlandish Bond films. The Ice Wave has nothing on secret shielded river base. Coming off the heels of Die Another Day and fully embracing the breakneck extreme nature of early 2000s media, you can kind of see how it makes sense. It's largely tongue-in-cheek fun with a few intriguing tie-ins to the franchise's history, and while you've really got to suspend your disbelief, it does lend itself well to the varied mechanics of a video game. And honestly, if you're walking around with an invisible car and a robot spider, all bets are off anyway. What helps to sell it all is the marquee cast, which is another real highlight. Familiar faces and voices take center stage. Judi Dench as M, John Cleese as Q, and yes, Pierce Brosnan in his final appearance as James Bond. Add in other heavy hitters like Willem Dafoe, Heidi Klum, and Richard Kiel returning as Jaws, and you've got a legitimate Hollywood-caliber cast. Pair this with very high production values, a fantastic theme song by Maya, and a bombastic score by Sean Callery, who composed for the TV show 24, and you've got a bona fide interactive blockbuster, especially by 2004 standards, and frankly, it still holds up pretty well. With such a strong single-player offering, then, it's a pity that the multiplayer isn't similarly elevated. A dedicated 2-player co-op mode is a reasonable extension of the main game's mechanics, but it's forgettable at best. Think Splinter Cell Conviction, but clumsier and half a decade prior. At this point, Bond games were most beloved for their competitive multiplayer modes, and despite its third-person approach, the lack of these modes is sorely felt, even though it was ultimately the right decision to focus on the campaign. That focus is what helps elevate the game to the heights it does achieve. So when you put it all together, Everything or Nothing gets 4 Gloobies out of 5. Some rough mechanics hold it back, and its multiplayer mode is underwhelming, but it sells you on the Bond experience like no other game before or since. GoldenEye may still have a stronger reputation, but all things considered, it's this that may well be the best James Bond game ever made. Everything or Nothing was released for PlayStation 2, GameCube, and the original Xbox, with the Game Boy Advance version not considered for this score. Thanks so much for watching. Stay fresh, cheese bags. We'll catch you back here real soon.